How long does it take to write a book? You'd be amazed how often I get asked that question, so let's talk about it. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens, and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. So how long does it take to write a book? It's kind of a bonkers question because, of course, it depends wildly. Does your book look like this, or does your book look like this? Just for starters, how long is your book going to be? Is this your first book, or is it your 15th? If people are, authors, they usually have more than just one or two that they've written, and often it goes faster the more you get used to story structure and things like that. So how long does it take you to write a book is a slightly better question. So things to keep in mind if you're trying to write that book that you've always wanted to write this year, and actually get a draft done. Here are some ways to kind of gauge how long it might take you to finish your book. Number one, how long do you think the book is going to be? This is really hard when you first start out, but just for some frame of reference, a high fantasy book might be 100,000 words or longer. A traditional length romance or thriller is typically around 80,000 words, 90,000 words. So it is technically considered a novel when you reach 50. Some people will still call 50K a novella, but that is the kind of industry standard minimum for a novel. So 50,000 words, and it can go all the way up to 120 and beyond. If you're Brandon Sanderson, of course, you can have 400,000 words or whatever The Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive books are. Okay, so when you kind of figure out about how long you think your story is going to be, is it going to hit that kind of in between 300 pages and something that most books are? That's going to be between that 80 and 90,000 mark. Okay, so hopefully this doesn't sound too overwhelming yet. You don't need to write a book all at once. All you need to do is take it in chunks. Write the next scene. That's it. Just the next scene, the next sentence, the next page, and prioritize it. That's a huge game changer. Just prioritize and continuously return to your story. An industry standard page is going to be 250 words. Often it's a little bit more that ends up on a page, but if we're talking, again, industry standards, then 250 words per page. Okay, so I'm giving you all of this background so we can do a little bit of math. Maybe you didn't get into writing to do some math, but if you're going to be project managing and really understanding your own process a little bit better and giving yourself more of a realistic expectation for how long it might take you to write your book, especially if this is your first one, here are some things that you can do. So I recommend doing a couple of writing sprints. So a writing sprint is just where you set a timer, between 5 and 20 minutes, and you write that entire time. So 20 minutes is a good gauge because it's hard to sprint really fast and just keep typing at top speed for that amount of time, especially if you're not in the practice of it. So it gives you a more realistic idea of how much you can actually write in that time. So during these sprints, try to just write at your normal pace, but you are timing yourself. It is 20 minutes. What do you do in 20 minutes? If you're a slower writer, that can be a benefit. If you're a faster writer, that can be a benefit in a different way. So try not to judge yourself. If you are not as fast as you would like to be, often you will get a little bit faster, but it's better for planning purposes to kind of err on the slower side. So let's say in 20 minutes, you can write 200 words, almost a page in 20 minutes. Awesome, great. So then you ask, you do that a couple more times, get the average, kind of get yourself on a good day, a bad day, and then you'll have a better idea of how much you can write in 20 minutes and really an hour. You add up, 3 20-minute sessions and you have a pretty average hour, right? So how much can you write in an hour? Maybe you can write 600 words in an hour. That's awesome. That is 2.5 pages. It might not sound like much, but you have 2.5 pages after 2.5 pages after 2.5 pages, and you are in really amazing shape for actually finishing a manuscript. So you have your speed, right? After that, you think, okay, how much time am I realistically going to devote to writing this month or this year? Again, err on the side of assuming it's going to be a little bit less. Life gets in the way, stuff gets busy, and that's okay. Don't judge yourself for that. Just try to get those expectations in a realistic spot. So what do you think it's going to be? And then take away some of that. And then you have the more realistic look at what time you might use to write. Okay, so once you've done all of that, I think I'm going to write 2 hours a week. So then you add everything up. That is 1,200 words on average per week. So then you take your 50,000 words or your 80,000 words or whatever you think your book is going to eventually be, and you divide that by the number of words that you can do in an hour. And you figure out how many hours approximately it's going to take you to finish this first draft. I know it is, again, a lot of math, but at least it's pretty simple math, so even somebody who's very much entrenched in the humanities can handle it without having to remember too much that I learned before. I once knew I had a decent amount of math. Okay, so you have your timeline kind of figured out. Maybe it's going to take you like 9 months of consistent work to finish your draft. That is awesome. That's less than a year. I mean, think about how much you can get done with little drops in that bucket. Okay, but when people say, how long did it take you to write this book? What they're not often taking into consideration is the editing phase, getting critiques from other people, proofreading, all of that. So assume that, especially for your first book, is going to take as long as that first draft did. Unless it's a book that you started, like I started the first book in this series, the 10 UN Academy series, when I was 17. So that one obviously took me like over a decade. It did not take me over a decade to edit. It took me 6 months or so to edit, but give yourself a good, healthy amount of time to do some rewrites, really polish it, get it into a good spot. So don't be discouraged if all of these calculations are bringing you to like a 1.5 years in the future. Think about a 1.5 years in the future opening this in the mail and how beautiful it is and how it's something that you created yourself that you would not have otherwise if you didn't start on this journey today. So how long does it take to write a book? It can take you, just a couple days to write a little short story that you can turn into a, physical book like this. Or it could take a couple years, depending on the length and depth of your project. But whatever your project is, those are hopefully some good guidelines to help you understand where, how far you can get in a year if you can finish it and put your book out into the world. I actually have some resources on my website that are basically a worksheet version of what I talked about today. So definitely check those out. You can do it, especially if you are a first-time writer, somebody who's always wanted to write a book. Then now there is no better time than right now to dig in, to just be consistent. You don't have to write every day. You don't have to, follow the advice of these multi-million-dollar authors. You can go at your own pace, in your own way, and still get there to the finish line. All right, so that is all I have for you today. Again, check out my website, carly-stevens.com, for all of those good resources over there. Make sure to subscribe, like the video if you like it, and I'll see you next week. Bye.